What then is the solution to postmodernism? There is but one answer, and it is nothing short of the advent of an entirely new age, the age of authenticism. As much as I'd like to take credit for coining the term of a whole new age, how cool would that be? I must give credit where credit is due, and as far as my research can tell, the acclaim rightfully goes to the British novelist Edward Dawkes. In 2011, Dawkes published a groundbreaking article in Prospect magazine entitled "Postmodernism is Dead." In his article, Dawkes wrote, and I quote, "In the beginning of postmodernism, artists, philosophers, linguists, writers, and musicians were bound up in a movement of great force that sought to break with the past, and which did so with great energy. What was the result? A new and radical permissiveness. Postmodernism was a high-energy revolt, an attack, a strategy for destruction. It was a set of critical and rhetorical practices that sought to destabilize the modernist touchstones of identity, historical progress, and epistemic certainty. Postmodernism changed the game from one of self-determination, a la Immanuel Kant, to other determination. Thus saith the postmodernist, I am constructed, therefore I am. Simply stated, postmodern philosophy is an intellectual black hole, whereby the light of many scholars, writers, thinkers, poets, musicians, politicians, journalists, and actors throughout the ages have been sucked into, never again to escape. By contrast, the philosophy of authenticism shines forth as the illuminating light of a new star, with the power to guide all who are willing to respond to conscience. Throughout history, individual persons have practiced authenticism, often in the midst of dreadfully inauthentic times. From Socrates and Aristotle to Dante and Joan of Arc, from George Washington and William Wilberforce to Abraham Lincoln, Florence Nightingale, Martin Luther King Jr., and Mohandas Gandhi, history's often dark past shines forth with radiant exemplars of what we today need to know and do in the age of authenticism. One of the West's greatest historical examples of authenticism was Geoffrey Chaucer, the great father of English poetry. Another great British writer and thinker, G.K. Chesterton, who I would also peg as an authenticist, wrote a book on Chaucer in which he penned a passage that piercingly captures the essence of authenticism. Quote, "There is at the back of our lives an abyss of light, more blinding and unfathomable than any abyss of darkness, and it is the abyss of actuality, of existence, of the fact that things truly are, and that we ourselves are incredibly and sometimes almost incredulously real." Close quote. How many people must perish by fire or ice in the pages of postmodernism before collective society will finally wake up and recognize that our very survival depends on our willingness to turn our backs on its bankrupt ideology? How many domestic drug overdoses and foreign decapitations must occur before we will once again embrace the great truth and virtues upon which our nation was built? How much corporate greed and political dishonesty will we tolerate before we once again exceed the reality of universal laws, accept the duties we hold to ourselves and each other, and resurrect the virtues of courage and integrity upon which all lasting societies were built? How much longer will we allow the idols of our young people to pollute their minds and impede their progress with the pernicious principles of postmodernism? The only real answer to the problems we face in America throughout the world is to put the ages and pages of postmodernism far behind us, by ushering in a great new age, even the age of authenticism. Thank you, Edward Dawkes, for your inspiring article. This new age of authenticism has the power to remind us not only of the reality of our own existence, but of the very real presence of universal laws that govern all long-term consequences and human decisions, which, as it turns out, is a surprisingly scientific reality, not merely an imagined theological or religious notion. This new age reminds all of us that while life itself has granted everyone the liberty to self-determine, to choose our own way, it has not granted us the consummate freedom to arbitrarily select the consequences of our choices and the exponential and residual impact of those consequences on others. The world has enough fiction, facade, farce, fraud, and facsimile. The world needs more integrity and truth. It needs more transparency and authenticity, and it needs it badly. Not the kind of transparency born of ill-kept promises from carefully crafted speeches, nor the rhetorical authenticity born of eloquent oratory. President Teddy Roosevelt warned of those who talk much and do little, and I quote, "It is a sign of marked political weakness in any commonwealth if the people tend to be carried away by mere oratory, if they tend to value words in and for themselves as divorced from the deeds for which they are supposed to stand. The phrase maker, the phrase monger, the ready talker, however great his power, whose speech does not make for courage, sobriety, and right understanding, is simply a noxious element in the body politic, and it speaks ill for the public if he has influence over them. To admire the gift of oratory without regard to the moral quality behind the gift is to do wrong to the republic." Close quote. The world is in desperate need of a renewed acceptance of Kantian categorical imperatives that acknowledge the reality of right and wrong clearly and distinctly, good and evil, and that recognizes the great truth that such things are not subject to the whims, wishes, or fancy of postmodern potentates and the pop culture, politicians, journalists, and scholars that perpetually prop them up. If the age of authenticism is to eclipse the perils and evils of postmodernism, who must we turn to for guidance in this new age? Who is the source of authentic wisdom? Is it the Democrats, the Republicans, the Libertarians, the individualists, the socialists, the Christians, the Buddhists, the Muslims, the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Scientologists, the followers of Socrates, Kant, Mill, etc.? Is it freedom-focused, as much as I'd like to say it is? No, the philosophy of self-action leadership is not rooted exclusively in any one party or persuasion, nor does it require explicit theological underpinnings to support it. You will, however, discern elements of authenticism in a variety of philosophical ideologies. The direct answer to the question of where we must all turn for guidance in this new age is the compass of your own conscience. What is a conscience exactly? Scientifically speaking, we don't really know for sure. Theologically speaking, many different explications have been put forth. But must one be a so-called believer to exceed the reality of conscience? Must one pay homage to a deity to acknowledge the existence of certain innate, intangible, visceral promptings that provide both wisdom and direction in one's life? While it is true that this voice of conscience can be dulled and even exterminated by perpetual disregard, this fact does not remove its self-evident reality in our lives. Indeed, what candid person alive could honestly claim to have never felt any influence from this sixth sense? My personal belief is that the voice of conscience provides a light to every human being that ever has been or ever will be born into this world, whether they're a believer or not. This voice is usually not loud or aggressive. It is soft, yet it can be piercing. It is a voice that can be silenced by anyone who chooses to ignore its promptings and disregard its wisdom. But the reality of its existence is a self-evident certainty that I believe all honest beings would own up to. Our goal at Freedom Focus is not to try to tell people how to live their lives. Quite to the contrary, we believe that individual liberty is sacrosanct and must be protected. Everybody should be allowed to live their life however they choose, as long as it doesn't harm other people or violate established laws. Our goal is not to restrict anyone's personal liberty. Our goal is to expand their freedoms by making their own decision in consultation with their own consciences. We are always at liberty to choose. The freedom to influence the consequences of our decisions, however, can only come from penitence to universal law, which governs absolutely, regardless of whether we know it or not, or whether we like it or not. At Freedom Focused, we teach correct principles in the hope that free men and women will then govern themselves in ways that result in positive long-term consequences for themselves and others. In summary, the Age of Authenticism signals a whole new era in the United States and throughout the world. It is an era marked by those with a deep reverence for life and truth. It is an age that acknowledges that incontrovertible reality of right and wrong, good and evil, and for its adherents to strive to do what is right and good. Authenticists are sensitive to conscience and proactive in heeding its counsels. They are real, genuine, authentic, honest, courteous, kind, and tolerant in their interactions with other people. It is a brand new world marked by character, integrity, courage, and compassion. It is a world that I hope you and I both will want to live.